Some places disappear from maps, others disappear from memory. But Portlock was devoured by something that still has not been named. Alaska is not just a state, it is a frontier. A vast, frozen wilderness that laughs in the face of human arrogance. Here, nature is not a backdrop, it is the lead actor. Mountains swallow the horizon, rivers move with an ancient rhythm, and winter is not just a season, it is a sentence. But behind its majestic glaciers and untouched forests hides something darker. Something buried under silence and snow. Legends, deaths, disappearances, not just isolated events, but part of a chilling pattern. Tonight, you and I are going to explore 5 of Alaska's most disturbing mysteries. These are not tales invented for campfires. These are true stories, twisted by time, stained by fear, and, to this day, unsolved. So turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and hold your breath. Because what you are about to hear might haunt you long after the screen goes dark. We begin, not with a legend, but a vanishing the kind that turns a town into a ghost. One, the haunting of Portlock. There was a time when Portlock, or Port Chatham as some maps called it, was a quiet fishing village tucked into the southern coast of the Kenai Peninsula. The year was 1905, when settlers first arrived. They were tough, determined, and perhaps foolish. Because even then, the native Alutiiq people warned them, do not build there. That land, they said, was cursed. But settlers, driven by the promise of salmon and timber, laughed off the stories. They built homes, a school, a post office. For a while, things seemed fine. But in Alaska, the danger does not always announce itself. Sometimes it just waits. It began with whispers. People spoke of strange sounds in the woods, branches snapping when there was no wind, growls that did not belong to any bear, and shadows that moved against the moonlight in unnatural ways. Then came the deaths. At first, they were brushed off. A miner who went missing in the hills. A trapper who never returned. Tragedies, yes, but not mysteries, not yet. But then the bodies began to show up. Mangled. Torn. Not just attacked, annihilated. Bones shattered. Organs missing. Flesh torn apart with a ferocity that made even seasoned hunters recoil. Some corpses were found near the water's edge, as if they had been dragged there. Others lay deep in the woods, their limbs twisted and flung like broken dolls. And through it, all the tracks, massive footprints, far larger than any man's. Deep imprints in the mud and snow, as if something heavy, something bipedal was stalking the village. By the 1930s, panic had set in. The local cannery, once the town's heartbeat, struggled to keep workers. Fishermen refused to venture too far from shore. At night, families bolted their doors and pushed furniture against the walls. Children stopped playing outside. The villagers began speaking of Nantinak, the shadow man of the forest, the predator in the mist, the creature of Alutiiq legend who took what he wanted and left nothing but terror behind. Some still tried to deny it. They blamed bears, wolves, even rival trappers, but you do not abandon an entire town over a bear. By 1949, Portlock was dying. Homes stood empty, paths overgrown. Only a handful of stubborn men remained, including the postmaster, a man named Andrew Kamluk, who insisted on staying. Maybe he was just doing his job. Maybe he did not believe the stories. Maybe he thought monsters were for children. But even he began to hear them scratching. Low moans from the tree line, something pacing outside his window at night. One morning, he found his woodpile scattered, claw marks gouged into the side of his shed. That winter he left. No goodbye, no final letter, just vanished. And Portlock was no more, but stories are not so easily buried. Over the decades, adventurers and thrill-seekers have returned to the ruins. Most stay only a night. Some do not even last that long. They report the same things, being watched. Branches breaking in patterns that seem deliberate. Cold spots that defy logic even in the heart of summer. One hiker, in 1973, armed with a rifle and a tape recorder, fled the site after just 2 hours. His last recording captured a low, guttural breathing not his own. He never went back. And then there is the photo. taken in 1981 by a wildlife biologist passing through the area. It shows what appears to be a man-shaped figure, 8 feet tall, standing partially behind a tree, its face blurred not from motion, but as if the lens refused to focus on it. Skeptics say Portlock fell victim to superstition and isolation. That fear, like mold, spreads in dark places, but even they struggle to explain the force and precision of the attacks. The uniform testimony of hundreds of terrified locals, or why even today no one, not even developers, dares to rebuild there. There are no roads leading to Portlock anymore. The forest has swallowed the town whole. The cabins are moss-covered, the signs rusted beyond reading. But sometimes, late at night, hunters in the area claim they still hear it. That low breathing, that crack of branches, that feeling that something is watching and waiting. 2. The sky watched back, Flight 1628. In Alaska, the land is dangerous, but the sky might be worse. The forest can hide 1,000 secrets. But the sky was supposed to be clean, safe, free. It was the domain of gods, birds, and machines we built with logic. But one cold night in 1986, that illusion shattered above the Alaskan wilderness when a veteran pilot saw something that was never meant to be seen. The man at the center of it was Captain Kenju Terauchi. He was not a rookie. This was not his first flight. He had more than 10,000 hours in the air, flying international routes for Japan Airlines. He would survive storms, mechanical failures, mid-air reroutes. Nothing shook him. Until Alaska. The night of November 17th began like any other. Flight 1628, a Boeing 747 cargo flight, was carrying a load of fine French wine from Paris to Tokyo. Their course would take them over Alaska, a routine leg, quiet, uneventful, and frigid. Then, at 5:11 p.m., somewhere above the icy spine of the Brooks Range, Terauchi spotted something 3 objects to the left of the cockpit window. They were not blinking like planes. They were not birds. And they were not meteors. They were glowing. 2 smaller orbs flew in tight formation. The third was massive, hulking in the sky like a floating fortress. Its lights pulsed in colors. He could not even name white that glowed like sunlight, orange that shimmered like molten metal, red that flickered like a slow heartbeat. Terauchi called for his county pilot. Then the flight engineer. Both men saw it. All 3 were staring at something that by every rule of aviation, physics, and reason should not exist. He radioed anchorage control. Unidentified traffic, he said. But radar showed nothing. Only one blip, their plane. Nothing else in the sky. The air traffic controller thought maybe it was a malfunction, maybe even a hoax. But Terauchi's voice was not the voice of a prankster. It was calm, measured, and shaking underneath. Then, the impossible happened. The objects moved, not like planes, not like anything made by human hands. They darted in front of the 747, then to the side. They hovered, then spun in perfect synchrony. They did not bank or drift or climb. They simply moved, like thoughts given form. No acceleration, no inertia. And then they were gone. Gone, but not really, because a moment later, the sky behind them went black. Not dark black, as if something huge had blocked the stars. Terauchi craned his neck. What he saw made his blood freeze. A massive craft larger than a battleship was trailing their plane, silent, cold, watching. Anchorage cleared the flight to change altitude and direction. Terauchi banked hard. The UFO followed. The FAA alerted the military. NORAD scrambled jets. But by the time they reached the area, the sky was clean again. No lights, no shadow, nothing. But the damage was done. Flight 1628 landed safely in Anchorage. The crew was unharmed, the wine unspilled. But their minds, forever altered. You would think the story would end there. A weird night. A good story, something to tell over beers. But Terauchi was not quiet. He gave interviews, wrote reports, described the shape, the behavior, the timing. And then, Almost immediately, he was grounded. Not fired, not punished, just removed, reassigned, shuffled into a desk job where he would never again touch a cockpit. Coincidence? The FAA claimed he had simply been overreactive, that he had a history of exaggeration. But his record was spotless. The crew backed him. The tapes confirmed what he saw. And still, no formal investigation, no classified documents released, just a silent, bureaucratic burial. But not everyone forgot. In the years that followed, pilots, both commercial and military, began coming forward. Anonymously at first. Then, publicly. They spoke of similar lights, similar movements, similar feelings of dread. But few dared report it. After all, they would seen what happened to Terauchi. He had spoken the truth, and was punished for it. And here's where things get even stranger. Declassified memos obtained years later through Freedom of Information Act requests revealed that military radars in the area did pick up something. An anomaly, they called it. Large, fast, without a transponder code or known flight plan. Yet no further action was taken. Why? Some believe it was a glitch. Others think it was something more. A test, perhaps of experimental military craft. But then why follow a Japanese civilian airliner? Why make contact? Others go further. They believe Flight 1628 was not a random encounter but a deliberate one. A message, a test of response. Or worse, a study. Let us pull back for a moment. Could it have been a trick of light? Atmospheric ice, a refraction. Some scientists suggest the crew saw bright planets, maybe Venus or Jupiter, appearing distorted through temperature layers. But that does not explain the movement. The changes in color. The perfect formation flying. The disappearance and reappearance. The missing radar signals. And, most importantly, it does not explain why 3 experienced crewmen, independently and in unison, described the same phenomena in real time over an open frequency. Even skeptics admit something happened. They just do not know what. To this day, Flight 1628 remains one of the most thoroughly documented and widely witnessed UFO encounters in aviation history. And yet, no answers. Only silence. Terauchi retired quietly. He never flew again. But he never retracted a word. Until his death, he insisted, what he saw that night was not of this earth. And maybe that is what Alaska does best. It does not give you monsters you can shoot, or villains you can chase. It gives you questions that breathe, and skies that stare back. 3. The triangle that swallowed thousands. There are places on Earth where logic stops working. Maps become suggestions, roads disappear, and people, thousands of them, step into silence, never to return. Alaska has such a place. They call it the Alaska Triangle. It stretches between Anchorage in the south, Barrow in the north, and Juneau in the east. 3 cold corners forming a region so vast and untouched that even satellites struggle to map it in detail. But it is not the size that terrifies people, it is what is missing from it. Since 1972, more than 16,000 people have disappeared within this area. Let that number sink in. 16,000. Mothers, hikers, politicians, entire families, skilled bush pilots, Navy veterans, children. Some went missing in storms. Others in broad daylight, under clear skies, with working radios and survival gear. Not one body, not one trace, just vanished. The most infamous of these cases happened in October 1972, when U.S. House Majority Leader Hale Boggs boarded a small twin-engine plane with 3 others. Their route was short, just a hop from Anchorage to Juneau. The weather was clear, the pilot was experienced, and yet the plane never arrived. It never sent out a distress call, it was never found, and neither was any wreckage. Over 40 aircraft, dozens of ships, and 400 searchers combed 32,000 square miles of wilderness. They found nothing. Not a shard of metal, not a shoe, not a scrap of cloth. It was as if the sky itself had swallowed them whole. And that case is just the beginning. You can try to dismiss one disappearance, maybe two, a few dozen explainable if you are generous, but thousands over decades across all weather conditions, from all backgrounds. Something else is happening here, something deeper than frostbite or wildlife. Something watching. Locals have theories. They speak of bad ground, of regions where compasses spin and shadows stretch the wrong way. They whisper about strange lights in the tree line, animal tracks that suddenly stop, and voices in the snow calling people by name even when no one else is there. Then there are the hikers. Some leave behind journals, fragments of radio communication, or disoriented satellite pings. In 1997, an experienced outdoorsman named Greg Myers left for a solo trek around Mount Iliamna. He had survival gear, flares, food, and GPS. He radioed in after day 2 to say everything was going well. Then silence. Weeks later, searchers found his camp food untouched, firewood stacked. His boots were placed neatly by his tent. No signs of struggle, no animal tracks. The snow had barely fallen. His footprints led 30 feet into the forest, then nothing. No drag marks, no prints leading away, just gone. Another story involves a group of friends from Fairbanks who set out in 2011 for a weekend of fishing. They made it to their cabin, as confirmed by a trail camera. A photo shows all 4 of them smiling at the river, holding up their catch. But 2 days later, the emergency beacon in their boat activated. When authorities arrived, the boat was floating half a mile offshore, running on low fuel, with no one on board. The fish were still in the cooler. The engine was fine. The radios worked. But the cabin was empty, the fireplace cold, their belongings untouched. No blood, no footprints, no answers. Just 4 more names added to the growing list of the missing. Some say these stories are just cautionary tales exaggerated by time and fear. That Alaska's brutal landscape is explanation enough. After all, its terrain is merciless. Temperatures plunge below 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Avalanches and blizzards strike without warning. Wild animals stalk the desperate and the weak. And the forest, the endless forest, can erase evidence in minutes. But then come the exceptions. Cases where the missing were highly trained survival experts, retired rangers, elite military personnel, men and women who knew how to navigate danger, who packed redundancies, who did not panic in emergencies, and yet they too vanished with the same silence, the same eerie absence of trace. Which brings us to the theories. Some are irrational, others less so. The first is geological. Scientists note that Alaska sits atop a nexus of fault lines. These shifts may cause magnetic anomalies that disrupt compasses and even brain function. Infrasound low-frequency vibrations could disorient or disturb humans in subtle ways. Add that to the bitter cold, the sensory deprivation, and the isolation, and you have a recipe for hallucinations and bad decisions. But even that does not explain everything, because equipment has disappeared too, not just people. Planes, helicopters, boats, entire machines gone without signals or debris fields. And then there is the strangest part of all the ones who come back. There are only a few, but their stories are always the same. They do not remember. Take the case of Ellie Ford, a teenage girl who disappeared on a camping trip in 2003. She wandered from her tent in the early morning hours, barefoot, and did not return. Her parents searched, then called for help. The search lasted 7 days. Then, on the 8th day, Ellie walked into a ranger station confused, silent, barefoot, and without any injuries, despite sub-zero temperatures and no supplies. When she was finally able to speak, all she said was, "He told me to come back." Who was he? She would not say. She could not. Her memory stopped at the moment she left the tent. Psychologists suggested trauma, disassociation, maybe even a fugue state. But when asked about the week she was missing, Ellie always described the same thing, a feeling of floating, of watching herself from above, and a voice deep and slow whispering her name from the trees. Is it madness or something older? Indigenous Alaskan tribes have long told stories about spirits that dwell in the cold places, creatures that lure the curious with mimicry and light, portals between worlds, hidden in stone circles, or within frozen caves. To the modern ear, it sounds like folklore. But folklore has a way of surviving when facts fail. And then there is the most unsettling theory of all, the human one. Some believe that the Alaska Triangle is not haunted by ghosts or aliens, but something far more terrifying, a man. Not a single man, perhaps, but a network. A predator, or predators who use the vast, lawless expanse of Alaska as cover. Places where no cell towers reach, where the snow buries footsteps within hours, where the screams of the hunted fade into the wind. Some recovered campsites suggest this. Half-burned fires, clothing slashed but not taken, tools missing, footprints starting in the middle of nowhere, then ending just as abruptly. And once, just once, a trail camera captured something strange. Not a creature, not a face. A hand, pale, long-fingered, reaching into the lens in the middle of a blizzard. No known footprints were found in the snow around it. The camera was found 15 feet from where it was mounted, buried beneath ice. No one knows who moved it. No one claimed the footage, and that is the nature of the Alaska Triangle. It does not just take, it whispers first. It shows you beauty, then it makes you forget you were ever here. And if you are lucky, very lucky, it lets you leave with only your questions. 4. The Otter Man, Alaska's most seductive nightmare. Some creatures hunt with teeth, others with fear. But the most dangerous ones, they hunt with familiarity, with comfort. With the voice of someone you trust, calling your name from just beyond the trees. In Alaska, there is a creature said to do just that. Its name is whispered with dread by the Tlingit people, Kushtaka. Roughly translated, it means land otter man, but that name is only the beginning of the horror. The Kushtaka is a shapeshifter, a being that slides between forms like water. One moment, it is a man. The next, a massive bipedal otter with glistening fur and glassy eyes. Sometimes, it is a child. Sometimes, a mother. Sometimes, the sound of your brother's voice, calling for help just beyond the ridge. But it is never what it seems. It never was. The first documented tales go back centuries, passed down through generations, not as fairy tales, but as warnings. The elder spoke of figures who walked out of the forest with strange eyes, people who had been presumed lost, only to return, wrong, quiet, distant, eyes unfocused, and always with no memory of where they had been. Sometimes they never spoke again. Other times they vanished once more, this time for good. Modern ears might scoff. Ottermen, shapeshifters, voice-stealing phantoms, it sounds ridiculous until you hear what the search and rescue teams have reported. Again and again, hikers have gone missing near riverbanks or along coastal trails. Several of them, once found, all described the same thing. A voice, gentle and familiar, leading them off course. One man, an oil surveyor named Thomas Reed, survived 2 nights lost in the Kenai National Wildlife Refuge in 2006. When rescuers found him, he was dehydrated, barefoot, and mumbling incoherently. But one phrase he kept repeating chilled the spine of the rescue medic. He kept laughing. He sounded like me. Thomas later claimed that he had heard his own voice echoing from the trees, calling out his name, mimicking his breathing. He said he saw a silhouette that moved like a man but was too long in the torso, too smooth in the limbs. He never went back into the field again. These are not isolated cases. The patterns repeat. People who are alone or emotionally vulnerable, lured toward water, toward darkness, then gone, or worse, returned without themselves. Psychologists tried to explain it as extreme isolation, hallucinations brought on by cold, hunger, or fear. And yes, those are all real forces in Alaska's wilderness. But there is always something more. One of the most terrifying examples happened in 2013, near the Chilkat River. A woman named Olivia had gone camping with friends. They drank, laughed, made a fire. It was supposed to be a break from the chaos of her job. That night, she wandered off to find a private spot to relieve herself. She never came back. Her friends searched. They called. No one answered. They assumed she had gotten lost, maybe injured. But then they found something strange, her coat neatly folded on a tree stump, her shoes placed beside it, as if someone had undressed for a warm bath. The problem, it was 27 degrees below freezing. 2 days later, Olivia was found wandering down a gravel road. Dazed and barefoot, she had no frostbite, no injuries. She did not even remember leaving the camp. But when they checked the GPS watch she had been wearing, there was something even stranger. It had recorded a slow, deliberate walk through the forest. Not a panic run. Not random. A straight line, over 2 miles ending at the bank of the river, where the GPS signal went dead. Then, 8 hours later, it picked up again. Another straight line back toward town. Almost as if she had been escorted. And then there is the voice. Multiple witnesses not connected to each other, not in the same decade, have described hearing loved ones' voices where they could not possibly be. One father, hiking alone, swore he heard his daughter calling for him in the exact tone she used as a toddler. But she was home, hundreds of miles away. He turned, took 1 step toward the sound, and nearly fell off a frozen cliff's edge. He described the voice changing in mid-sentence, shifting into something deeper, less human, laughing. Some believe the Kushtaka feeds on confusion, on fear, on vulnerability, that it does not kill, at least not always, it consumes something far worse. Identity. There are stories rare and whispered of people who encounter the creature and are given a choice: die as a human, or be reborn as one of them. A Kushtaka. Think that is far-fetched, then consider this. In 2020, a retired park ranger from Sitka anonymously posted a report on a fringe cryptid forum. In it, he described a young boy who had vanished near a glacial lagoon. Days later, the boy returned, soaking wet, but unharmed. His family rejoiced. But the ranger noticed something off. The boy did not blink. His movements were too smooth. His voice oddly monotone. And that night, when the boy thought no one was watching, the ranger claimed to see him standing motionless by the water, staring at his own reflection for over an hour, just staring, unmoving. The ranger filed a report. No follow-up. The family left town. The child was never seen again. And then there is the deepest fear that the Kushtaka is not a single being, but a species, a network, ancient, hidden, feeding off human emotion like heat from a fire, that when you hear your name in the dark, even if it is your own voice, it may already be too late. And perhaps that is why the stories persist. Why indigenous elders still teach children not to wander near rivers after dusk. Why certain parts of the forest remain untouched, not out of superstition, but survival. And why some hikers, even today, return home with eyes that never quite focus the same way again. Because maybe, just maybe, the Kushtaka is not just a story. Maybe it is waiting in your own voice, in the reflection that does not blink back, in the footsteps you swear you heard when no one was there. And maybe it is closer than you think. 5. HAARP, the experiment hidden in plain sight. Some threats creep through the trees. Others fall from the sky. But the ones we fear most, the ones we barely talk about, are those hidden in plain sight, surrounded by fences, buzzing with electricity and labeled science. Tucked deep in the Alaskan interior, where the mountains flatten into a bleak horizon, sits a facility that looks like it belongs on another planet. Row after row of towering metal antennas stretch toward the heavens, humming with unseen power. The air feels thinner here. The silence, heavier. This is HAARP, the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program. Officially, it is a joint civilian and military project built to study the ionosphere, the upper layer of Earth's atmosphere, which plays a critical role in radio communication, navigation, and weather. That is the line they give you. But in the decades since HAARP came online, the facility has become the epicenter of one of the most chilling modern conspiracy theories. That it is not just studying the skies, it is controlling them. Let us start with what we know. HAARP uses massive amounts of energy, millions of watts, to blast high-frequency radio waves into the ionosphere. These waves heat up the atmosphere in small, controlled bursts, creating artificial disturbances. Scientists claim this helps them study how solar radiation affects our planet, but some researchers and many local residents believe those disturbances are not as controlled as we are told. The first red flags came in 2002 when a series of unnatural lights were spotted flickering above Gakona, the town nearest to HAARP. Locals described skies that turned blood red without warning, birds that flew in manic, endless circles, and electronics that failed en masse. That same week, Anchorage experienced a record-breaking heat wave, a sharp 40-degree spike in just 3 hours. Coincidence? Maybe. But then it happened again, and again, patterns began to emerge. Sudden snowstorms in spring, flash floods in valleys that had not seen rain in months, areas where radio signals vanished for hours. And always, just before or just after, had been running routine experiments. Some started to ask, what if it is not just a research project? What if HAARP is a weapon? At the center of the storm, pun intended, is the idea that HAARP can manipulate the weather, not by casting spells or pushing buttons, but by injecting energy into key layers of the atmosphere, disrupting natural patterns. The jet stream, the pressure systems, the magnetic fields that guide storms like invisible rivers. And there is precedent for this. In the 1960s and 70s, the U.S. government openly tested weather modification programs like Project Storm Fury, which attempted to weaken hurricanes by seeding clouds with silver iodide. That was decades ago with technology far less sophisticated than today. So what is stopping HAARP from going further? Some believe the facility played a role in several major natural disasters: Haiti's earthquake in 2010, Japan's tsunami in 2011, massive droughts in California, sudden typhoons in Asia. The pattern, they claim, is too precise to be nature alone. Of course, the scientific community denies this. HAARP, they say, is not capable of influencing tectonic plates or ocean currents, but here's the thing, it does not have to. You do not need to cause an earthquake to cause chaos. You just need to make people believe you can. That is the true power of psychological warfare, and HAARP may be its most silent weapon. And then we come to the sounds. Amateur radio operators, hams as they are called, have long reported strange frequencies emanating from the direction of hay. Some sound like mechanical whirring. Others more disturbingly resemble human voices, heavily distorted, repeating sequences of numbers or phrases in multiple languages. In 2016, a signal nicknamed the Banshee was recorded outside the perimeter. It pulsed every 13 seconds, echoing like a deep, synthetic scream. Experts were baffled. HAARP denied it originated from their facility, but independent analysis revealed the source was within a 2-mile radius, placing it well within HAARP's boundaries. And then came the dreams. Residents of Gakona and nearby villages began reporting shared nightmares. Flickering lights, loud hums, shadowy figures standing outside their windows, whispering in tones they could not understand. At first, people thought it was just paranoia. The power of suggestion, until it started happening to outsiders, tourists, reporters, and even military contractors who visited the site. Many complained of sudden migraines, nosebleeds, memory loss. One journalist claimed he lost 6 hours of time while standing outside the facility. His phone died. His watch froze. He could not remember what he had been doing. He never published the article. Perhaps the darkest theory surrounding HAARP is not about weather at all, but about minds. Some believe that HAARP's low-frequency waves are being used to influence human emotion and behavior, that by tuning signals to certain ranges it is possible to induce fear, confusion, or even compliance. This is not as sci-fi as it sounds. Declassified documents from military projects in the 1980s confirm that the Pentagon explored using sound frequencies to alter mood and disrupt enemy troops. Projects like MK-Ultra and Operation Pandora real initiatives with real victims proved the U.S. government has a history of experimenting on its own people. HAARP, they say, is simply the latest tool. And perhaps that is why, in 2014, the government handed it over to a civilian research institution, not to end the program, but to remove it from public accountability. Since then, activity at the facility has only increased. New antennas, stronger transmitters, higher secrecy. They say it is for science, but then why? When asked direct questions, do they give vague, evasive answers? Why are documents so heavily redacted? And why are the people who live nearest to the station plagued by health problems no doctor can explain? HAARP has never officially been linked to any natural disaster, health crisis, or psychological episode. Its defenders are quick to call critics conspiracy theorists. They mock the idea of a government-controlled weather machine as science fiction. And yet, the fear remains. Because if it is not doing anything wrong, why does it feel so wrong? Why does the air around it buzz like something alive? Why do birds avoid the sky above it? Why do people wake up screaming, remembering voices they never heard? Maybe HAARP is not evil. Maybe it really is just a science experiment. But if so, it is one of the most terrifying experiments ever conducted. Because sometimes the scariest monsters are not creatures in the woods. They are towers on a hill, powered by silence, and protected by denial. There is a silence in Alaska that is not just quiet, it is watchful. A silence so complete it feels like it is pressing in from all sides. Not the silence of peace, but the silence before something moves. Now that you have heard the 5 stories, Portlock, the skies above Flight 1628, the Alaska Triangle, the Kushtaka, and the hum of HAARP, maybe you have noticed it too. There is a pattern here, and it is not about Alaska being cursed or haunted or evil. It is about what happens when human beings step into a place too big to understand and refuse to admit that we are not in control. Think about it. In Portlock, a whole town simply gave up. Grown men with rifles and axes, hardened by logging and fishing, fled into the night without even looking back. They did not just abandon their homes, they abandoned the illusion that they were safe, that they were stronger than what lived in those woods. Flight 1628 was not a horror story, it was a confrontation. A veteran pilot, flying a massive jet loaded with cargo, suddenly found himself not at the top of the food chain, but an insect, shadowed by something older, faster, and completely uninterested in explaining itself. In the Alaska Triangle, we see what happens when people disappear, not because of violence, but because the land itself seems to take them. Like, Alaska is a living organism with a mind of its own, one that occasionally decides it wants something. Or someone, and the Kushtaka, that is the fear of being known too well. The creature does not kill you by force. It invites you, using your own voice, your own memories. It does not attack from the outside. It undoes you from the inside. Then there is RP and the idea that the monsters are not hiding in the woods at all. They are behind locked doors, in labs, running experiments. HAARP represents our deepest fear, that we have become the thing to fear. That the real threat is not from beyond, but from within, made by our own hands, powered by curiosity. We can no longer contain. And that Tabdanogun is where it all converges. Because these stories, whether supernatural, psychological, or technological, all deal with the same truth. The unknown is not just scary. It is necessary. We fear what we do not understand because it reminds us that we are still children, still vulnerable, still searching in the dark for a light switch we will probably never find. And Alaska is the perfect mirror for that fear. A place too vast to chart, too old to tame, too cold to bargain with. It does not offer answers. It offers echoes. The crunch of snow when no one's behind you. The static in your radio that does not stop when you turn it off. The shadow that moves just as you look away. The voice calling your name not in malice, but in familiarity. Alaska is not just land. It is a threshold. A place where the veil between the known and the unknowable is thin enough to tear with a whisper. And if you step through it, you might not come back the same. So what does this mean for us? Are we meant to avoid places like this? Board up our minds and hearts against what we can't define? Live in fear? No, because fear, at its core, is a teacher. And what these 5 Alaskan stories show us is that the world is still wild, not just in terrain, but in mystery. That even now, with all our satellites and science and smug confidence, there are places that refuse to be mapped. And maybe that is a good thing. Because a world without mystery is a world without wonder. And wonder, even when it terrifies us, is what keeps us human. So the next time you find yourself staring at a snow-covered forest, or flying over a black expanse of wilderness, or walking alone beneath a sky that suddenly seems a little too quiet, remember, you are not just looking at Alaska. Alaska is looking back